Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. I would now like to call the March 25th, 2025 Longmont City Council regular session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel or on longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. May we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Christ,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Fairing,
Here.
Councilmember McCoy,
Present.
Councilmember Popkin,
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez, Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilor Rodriguez is absent tonight. So let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder to the public, in accordance with the council's rules of procedure, the rules for providing public comment are as follows. Only Longmont residents and employees of the city of Longmont may speak during first call public invited to be heard. And you must provide your address and name on the list outside before the meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Anyone may speak on second reading or public hearing item, and you're asked to sign up for that particular item before the meeting. And anyone may speak at final call, public invited to be heard. Members of the audience shall refrain from disruptive, vulgar, or abusive language, applause, heckling, or other actions that interfere with the orderly function of this council. May I have a motion to approve the February 25th regular session minutes?
I'll move the February 2025 minutes.
I have a correction.
Oh, you have a correction.
With correction.
Are you seconding it, and we'll discuss? Okay, and it was seconded by, so the motion to move the minutes was made by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Fairing, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any discussion? Councilor Christ.
I'm sure it's just a typo, but in the public invited to be heard, Bobette Berger was listed as his, and if we could change that to her. And other than that, I've, as amended, agreed to approve the February 25th meeting minutes.
Okay, so that is, as amended,
Amended, yes.
the minutes have been approved and still seconded by Councilor McCoy. All those in favor?
We don't use pronouns. Use pronouns
This did.
All those in favor, let's vote. I'm sorry, I got here, I sat down so fast after we came in that I didn't pull up the screen.
anymore. Mine took a long time to load.
Mine did too, actually.
Yeah, I had to.
Okay,
I'm a yay if we want to move on.
you're a yay. Does that make it unanimous?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimous. And I do need a motion now for the March 4th, 2025 regular session minutes.
I move we accept the March 4th, 2025 regular session meeting minutes.
Seconded.
Oh,
Okay.
passed unanimous. I get it. Oh, he's not here. Oh, with the
Okay.
announcement.
So the March 4th minutes have been moved by Councilor Chris, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any discussion? Let's vote. Councilor Popkin. Oh, you did?
Can you see it? No. No, it doesn't show up. on the-
Okay, so for both, the last ones, February 25th and March 4th, they passed 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent. Thank you. Now we're at agenda revisions. Do we have any revisions? Are there any? No? Okay. And do any councilors want to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas? Seeing no one, we're going to move on to the city manager's report.
No report, Mayor and Council.
All right. And we don't have any special reports or presentations, so we're on to first call, public invited to be heard. Remember that we need your name and address, and the first one is John Hoffland.
Where's the timer? Hold on, before you get started. Oh,
We're still getting organized up here,
yeah,
John.
we are.
Can you turn on the mic? It's at the up lower right.
That one?
There you go.
Good deal. Okay, John Hoffland, 1036 Willow Creek Circle. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Longmont's water website states fluoride has been added to drinking water in the U.S. to prevent tooth decay and reduce the risk of oral disease. Longmont has been fluoridating its water supply since 1958. The website states that Longmont's water has a naturally recurring level of 0.2 milligrams per liter, so sodium silifluoride must be added to the water to reach the recommended level of 0.7, and states that Longmont does not have any plans to discontinue fluoridation. Well, I'm here to ask you to reconsider those plans. What? Are you crazy? Everyone will get cavities. Well, that would have been my reaction too, not long ago. I grew up a fluoride believer and drinking the fluoride Kool-Aid myself, as if there have been no new learnings or scientific advances since the 1950s. Cavity rates have dropped, but the data from the WHO, according to the data from WHO, they've dropped just as much in countries without fluoridation, as you can see on this graph. In 1999, study showed that dental benefits of fluoride are gained primarily topically and not systemically. There are risks, but little to no benefit from ingested fluoride. There are better ways than the water supply to get fluoride if one wants. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. That's an undisputed fact. You can look at the bag that they send it in. It says toxic right there. Okay. Should Longmont residents be paying to have poison added to their drinking water? In September, based on the latest data, a federal court in California ruled that fluoridation chemicals pose an unreasonable risk to health and directed the EPA to revise fluoridation recommendations. The EPA has worked at the speed of government for the last 7 months. In fact, in 1983, NIH convened a panel of experts to recommend new fluoridation standards to the EPA. It's 42 years later, and the EPA has yet to adopt the lowered recommendations. During COVID, we learned that the government health agencies are not up to date, don't always get it right, and are not working in the people's best holistic interest. Studies have shown that fluoridation causes statistically significant IQ loss in children. Did you know that baby formula made with fluoridated water has 250 times the amount of fluoride as breast milk? Other adverse effects of fluoridation include kidney issues, dental fluorosis, weakening of the bones, hypothyroidism, osteosarcoma, arthritis, memory loss, and more. Longmont can wait for the EPA, or it can proactively eliminate the unreasonable health risks now. Most Europe doesn't
John.
fluoridate. Utah just passed a law requiring their communities to stop fluoridation.
Thank you, John.
Nothing is stopping Longmont from taking action now.
Strider, welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ain't that tall. Strider Benston, 951 to 17th. Some of you know that I was not in Selma 3 weeks ago, and the reason I was not able to get there has to do with a number of people from Longmont, some of them connected with the city. So it was a real blow after put my whole life into the movement and narrowly escaping being beat to death a number of times for to win the right to vote, and now, you know, it's being thrown away. One of the things that's happening currently is there's already coming up again to destroy the post office. That was created by Benjamin Franklin before we had a country, and it's in the Constitution, but those who are trying to destroy the Constitution and Social Security, they say there's thousands of people 150 years old getting checks. They did find one dead person in Seattle, but he was alive, and so they stole his Social Security and went back several months to take back and make him pay what he had already paid. And then he went up and he had to stand in line all day, and it took weeks, I think, before he finally was able to prove that he was alive. That's the game. A South African billionaire has bought the Supreme Court, bought the presidency, and that's what we're dealing with now. People voted for lower prices of eggs, but what they get is more forest fires, more floods, more powerful hurricanes, and they're trying to abolish the weather service, so no one will even know when a hurricane is coming, unless you have a Sharpie on a map to say it's going to Alabama instead of South Carolina. But that is basically what we're dealing with, and I've said for the last 8 years, you cannot let this dictatorship consolidate, otherwise we won't have a country anymore. And they call it Project 2025, which the president said he'd never heard of, although all of his people wrote it and he's obeying it step by step. It's serious, and I believe in democracy, but Benjamin Franklin, when he came out of the convention in 1787, a woman asked him, "What kind of a country do we have?" And he said, "A republic if we can keep it." A republic means the rule of law rather than persons. And but if they take over and make the laws for themselves, I put my whole life in fighting for democracy, and I think we need to keep it. And thank you much.
Thank you, Strider. Audrey Dunn. Is Audrey here?
She's on the way.
She's on the way. Okay. We'll call her a little later. Gary Hodges.
Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. So I'm going to start with a little review, and let's where to go. And also request that the graphics I'm presenting are visible to the home viewer. So this is a plot I showed a few weeks ago, and I neglected to mention a rather important technical point, and it's a little hard to see, but the axes are, it's a log-log plot. So at the extremes of the axes, we're talking about really large numbers. So I think it's kind of important when you look at it. So to review, plentiful energy is wealth, lack of energy is poverty. One example I gave last week was Dominican Republic versus Haiti. Haiti is in the poverty area, and Dominican Republic in the wealthy area. So two countries, same island, vastly different outcomes. So I hope it is intuitively obvious that this energy versus wealth relationship must also extend to states and cities as well. So while there is no such thing as a low energy rich country, there is also no such thing as a low energy rich state or city. And so this dovetails into the next plot I'm going to show. And so here we're looking at the penetration of wind and solar into the energy mix of various countries versus electricity price per kilowatt hour. And similar to the previous plot, there is no such thing as cheap so-called green energy. So I like plots like these because they are top-line numbers that make it hard to fudge reality. So the takeaway is obvious, and that is wind and solar are, without question, the most expensive electricity sources that can be added to an energy portfolio. So this obvious truth is rapidly becoming widely accepted. So the next time a person is heard claiming wind and solar are cheap, you'll know it stems from ignorance, or the truth is known, but it's being obfuscated for a hidden reason. So why do I speak frequently about energy? Well, it's because energy and the associated policies we are advancing in this city are by far the most important issues we face. So it's not housing. Housing prices will ebb and flow with time, and other issues will rise and fall in the public consciousness. But we've already begun ramping our utility rates toward extraordinary levels, and continuing down this road will forever be a burden on the residents of this city and a never-ending drag on our economy. So we're foolishly choosing a path of diminishing wealth versus one that leads to more wealth. So, yeah, again, right, no such thing as low energy rich country. Energy is wealth, lack of it is poverty, and there is no cheap green electricity. So these plots are showing up in a number of different places, letters to the editor of the Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post and other places by a number of different people in slightly different formats, but you get the point. So that's what I got tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Steve Altshuler. Sounds like my washer.
Steve Altshuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. I think I'll dovetail off of Gary and talk,
You're
excuse
good.
me,
Go ahead.
and talk a little bit about energy also, but also with the city of Longmont. I've mentioned several of these things at different times. There have been studies that 24% of the cost of housing is all state and local fees. So a $600,000 home, if there were no state and local fees, would sell for $450,000. So the city council here, and not just here, but many city councils in Boulder County and across the nation, keep saying, everything is too expensive. We need to build low-income housing. But if the city stopped all the fees, everything would be much lower income and people could just afford it. As it is right now, the city takes all the fees from the builder, the prices of the housing goes up, the city uses those fees to build low-income housing that they own, and then people are priced out of owning something themselves, and they have to come back and rent from the city. And then on top of that, gas is 1/4 the price of electricity. So say it the other way, it's cleaner. Electricity costs 4 times as much as natural gas. And you want to do away with natural gas appliances. So if a person were spending $200 a month on natural gas, they'd spend $800 a month for electricity for the same amount of heat. So city councils, not just here, but all across the country, are making it so expensive that people can't live in their own homes, and then they have to come and rent from the city. On top of that, here, the city owns the utility company. And to me, it's a gross conflict of interest that you keep driving up the prices, making it harder for people to live, and forcing them to come back and stay in low-income housing that the city owns. So I would like the city to reconsider some of the things they've been doing. They could lower the prices by getting rid of the fees, let people buy their own places, and let the free market level things out. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Seeing no one else on the list, did Audrey make it back in? I don't see her, so I will close first call public invited to be heard. I don't see her. Okay. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would you mind reading the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you.
The second reading and public hearing for all ordinances introduced on this consent agenda will be held on April 8th, 2025. Item 9A is ordinance 2025-23, a bill for an ordinance approving an economic development incentive and partnership agreement with the TLC Learning Center to further childcare and childhood education opportunities for city residents and employees. Item 9B is ordinance 2025-24, an ordinance amending Title IV of the Longmont Municipal Code, amending Chapter 4.06 concerning the establishment of the tourism improvement districts in the city of Longmont. Item 9C is Resolution 2025-15, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the Second Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Housing Authority to provide funding for the Longmont Housing Authority Security Cameras Project. Item 9D is Resolution 2025-16, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the state of Colorado for a grant from the Community Access Enterprise for Community Accelerated Mobility Project, CAMP. Item 9E is Resolution 2025-17, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving a memorandum of understanding concerning a regional bike share program. Item 9F is Resolution 2025-18, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for support and services. And 9G is approve 4 capital improvement program amendments.
Counselor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I wanted to motion to remove items D, E, and F from the consent agenda.
Okay. Counselor Christ.
I would like to remove item B.
Okay, and I will call for a motion to move the consent agenda minus items B, D, E, and F.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
That's moved by Counselor Popkin, seconded by Counselor Christ. Let's vote.
And G wasn't mentioned.
G and C were not mentioned. Just noting on what we're voting on.
A, C, and G.
Right, but the motion on the screen says.
Yeah, C and G are added.
It should be B, D, E, and F.
Correct.
So you can take off G. A good catch, thanks. So if you can just, in the minutes, make sure that you don't put G. That would be great. And that passes 6-0 with Counselor Rodriguez absent. Now we're, actually, this is moving pretty fast. We're at ordinances on second reading and public hearing on any matter. So the first one is A. It's a public hearing on Consolidated Annual Performance Report, CAPER for short, for 2024 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and CDBG-CV, which is the Grant Plus COVID programs, and 2024 Annual Performance Report for the Affordable Housing Fund, Attainable Housing Fund, and Inclusionary Housing Fund. And it looks like we're going to have a staff presentation.
Sorry
Welcome,
about that.
Marley.
I tried to steal Jim Youngstag's computer on accident. Mayor and members of council, Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director for the city. I have the entire HCI team here tonight. So
Noticed, yeah.
yeah, they're all here because this is a really group effort. So first of all, we're going to do our regular annual report on our CDBG and affordable housing programs, but also typically in the last couple of years, we have saved the inclusionary housing annual report that has come typically later in the year. This is our goal, and it has been our goal for some time, to morph them. So we're doing one annual report on our housing programs. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to the team.
Thank you, Molly. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Christy Weisman, the city's housing investment manager, and very excited to be talking about our 2024 accomplishments with you today. And I want to start by saying we gave a version of this presentation to our Housing and Human Services Advisory Board on March 13th. And they asked a lot of great questions, gave us a lot of good input. And so that definitely helped make us a well-oiled machine for our presentation to you tonight. So thanks again to our wonderful advisory board members. All right, so the first half of the presentation will start with our CAPER, which is a lovely government acronym created by HUD, and it's essentially our annual report that we have to report on our CDBG program to HUD every year. So Longmont is an entitlement city, meaning we get CDBG on a formula basis from HUD. Every year it's based on when Congress passes their budget, and HUD does their numbers based on population. And we do not have our number for 2025 yet, in case you were wondering. So our program year is the calendar year, and so we're always playing a little bit of catch up. That's quite common for cities with the calendar year program year. So we're talking about the calendar year for last year. And then our CAPER is due to HUD by the end of this month, and tonight represents our public hearing and the end of our public comment period, and then we will be submitting it to HUD this week. So overall program accomplishments, we go into more detail in the council comm that we sent to you, but overall in 2024, 234 households were served using CDBG as well as the CDBG CV. That was that special COVID money. And here's a breakdown of households by AMI. There are targets that HUD sets for different income levels, and making sure that the majority of CDBG funding is for low income households. I do want to point out that, as council is aware, we went through a transition with our housing rehabilitation program last year. So we had staff change, and we made the decision, instead of continuing to administer the program in-house with staff, we have now, as of February, executed our contract with Brothers Redevelopment, which is a local nonprofit that does CDBG rehab programs for multiple communities in Colorado. They do a great job, and we are now fully up and running with them, sending folks their way. So we expect many, many more households to be served in 2025 now that we have Brothers on board, because it was a lengthy procurement process following all those federal procurement rules. So I wanted to highlight a couple of CDBG projects. We completed the In-Betweens Terry Street roof rehab. This was awarded in 2023, and they finished up the last of the work early this year, and this replaced roofing on two of the In-Betweens properties in town. Looks really nice, and we'll keep those buildings extending their useful life for another 20 to 30 years. Also, LHA, so as is on the agenda tonight, the security cameras project, this has been a long time coming. CDBG award in 2022, and LHA is finally getting those camera installed this year at multiple properties. Also last year, we made a CDBG award for the suites to replace all of the original doors. That property used to be a hotel, and the doors have been an issue for residents. They get locked out all the time, and new doors will be a very big improvement in safety, security, and privacy for residents. So they're very excited about that, to get that going this year. So this is an overview. Again, in the council comm, had an attachment of our much more complicated CAPER spreadsheets, but kind of giving you an example of money coming in for CDBG in 2024. So we always have carry forward money every year because our calendar year, program year, but we don't actually do awards until June. So there's always money being transferred from the previous year to the next year. So we had carry forward balance coming in that was already earmarked for projects. And then in 2024, our HUD allocation was $478,873. And then by the end of 2024, we did receive about $69,000 in program income. So this is when previous projects loans are paid off, or if folks that received rehab loans in the past sell their homes and pay them off, we get that money back in, and then we just recycle that back into CDBG programs. And that was more program income than we were expecting. So we're excited to put that money to use in 2025. And then as you can see, we have a good chunk of carry forward for 2025, and we are expecting to use a good majority of that for rehab, especially now that we have Brothers on board. They've hired a staff person just for Longmont, so they're really rearing to go and excited they have capacity to serve a lot of households. And then we will also be putting out our annual competitive award cycle here in the next week to solicit projects for that money as well. So CV, as I mentioned, were those special COVID dollars, and as of 2024, Molly worked very hard to get all those dollars expended before the end of the year. So here's an overview of some of the projects. Recovery Cafe, there was some site feasibility for their work at the suites, and then Veterans Community Project as well as LHA, multiple accessibility projects to improve ADA accessibility, parking lots, ramps, entrances to multiple buildings around town. So, racial and ethnicity data, we are required by HUD to report race and ethnicity data using their categories. But we do not require folks to self-report. So there's always a little bit of a gap here in that there are a lot of folks that don't report or report other because they feel like the categories don't adequately reflect how they self-identify. And we like to show this just to kind of see how are we generally serving folks in our diverse community compared to the population demographics of Longmont, as well as it's a required reporting element of HUD. So I do want to point out that we had quite a significant number of folks in 2024 who decided not to report or who decided to report a racial category of other or multiracial. And I think this speaks to the fact that the federal government's race and ethnicity definition buckets, which also mirror the census buckets, a lot of folks just feel like they're not adequately fit into one category or the other. So we're never going to get 100% matching of folks. So just wanted to point that out. So Home and Home ARP. So Longmont is part of the Boulder Broomfield Home Consortium. So we are part of a group with City of Boulder, Boulder County, and City and County of Broomfield. And we are on a rotational balance for home awards. So Home is another HUD funding program that is really geared towards funding development projects. So we kind of share amongst ourselves. So we get money every 4 years, and our home award year was 2023. So we made awards in 2023 that one of the projects, the In-Betweens Wesley Townhome projects, is up and running. Beautiful construction photo. They had 4 framing teams, so they got framed really quickly. It's really exciting, not too far from here. So that project is actively underway, and that had both a home and a home ARP, which again was a special COVID American Rescue Plan funding source. And then 2 other projects that were awarded last year were kind of in a holding pattern, working on getting the agreements up and going. So that is kind of the end of our federal funds CDBG portion of the presentation. Then I'm going to transition to our local affordable housing fund. So in 2024, we did a lot of work with the Affordable Housing Fund. I wanted to highlight just some top level numbers here. So we have about $7 million in various stages in the pipeline to support projects, both new unit generation as well as rehab or preservation projects. So last year we made several awards to projects that are either actively under construction or are expected to be under construction this year. Our 2024 Affordable Housing Fund investments will serve an estimated over 900 Longmont households and are projected to create 457 new affordable housing units over the next several years. And my favorite statistic is the leveraging statistic. So one of the great things about our affordable housing funds is we take those local dollars, whether it's from the general fund transfer that you all graciously have given the fund for the last several years, or whether it's fee in lieu from inclusionary housing. And we are able to take, for every dollar into the affordable housing fund, we can go out and get $79.25 of other people's money to bring back to Longmont to do projects. So that leveraging amount is really exciting, and it's mainly driven by LIHTC projects, so tax credit, getting out and getting private equity investment back into the projects. But this is a really important reminder of just how much farther our money can go where we make that initial local investment. So just wanted to highlight a couple of projects. Ascent is an LHA partnership with Penrose, which you all are familiar with, and that's actively under construction. This had a $1.8 million Affordable Housing Fund award. Should be done in January. True North, which we're all very excited about, actively under construction and spending our infrastructure money that we have promised from the Affordable Housing Fund as well as the Attainable Housing Fund. And we are expecting first homes to be ready to close in August. And then other pipeline projects, this represents projects that were awarded either this year or last year and that are in various stages of the entitlements process. So these all feed into that number a few slides ago about how many units we will get over the next few years from investments that awards that we've already made into projects. A couple other non-development related highlights of the Affordable Housing Fund that I want to point out is we use the Affordable Housing Fund to help subsidize personal finance counseling for Longmont residents. So we pay Boulder County. They have a really amazing housing counseling program in which you can go and get assistance on how do I buy a house, foreclosure prevention, how do I improve my credit, how do I pay off my student loans. And Longmont residents access those for free. And so in 2024, 195 Longmont residents accessed 239 sessions, which means people went more than once, which is always good to see. And then we also use the Affordable Housing Fund to fund a consultant, a planning consultant out of Tetra Tech. And this has been one of our most popular, well-received service kind of components of the Affordable Housing Fund. So we are able to provide, again, that discounted and subsidized planning expertise to nonprofit and small kind of mom and pop developers who are working on housing projects. So Habitat for Humanity, the In-Between, Hope, Longmont, all of these local organizations really rely on this to get through the entitlements process quickly and successfully. And it saves time for those organizations as well as city planning and engineering staff. And then, as we talked about last week, we have $250,000 allocated last year from the Affordable Housing Fund for our new local down payment assistance program, which we are very excited about. So that kind of summarizes our funding accomplishments. Now I'm going to turn over to Kayleen, and she's going to talk about regional housing trends, data, as well as inclusionary program highlights.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. As Christy said, my name is Kayleen Whaley. I am the Affordable Housing Program Specialist for the City of Longmont. And so tonight we're going to go over housing trends. We're going to talk about where progress is for our affordable unit generation goals, and then how inclusionary housing is really impacting Longmont. So starting off with rental housing trends. So if everyone takes a look at the chart on the left-hand side, that chart is telling the story that the rental housing market has stabilized after historic increases. The downside is it has stabilized at those higher rental rates that we saw prior to 2020. All right, so this one is talking about for sale ownership trends. And if you take a look at the chart on the left, it is saying also the same thing, that for sale housing market rates have stabilized, but they have stabilized at those higher sales prices. All right, so jumping into our regional housing goals. So just as a reminder to this group, in 2017, the City of Longmont partnered with other jurisdictions across Boulder County to kind of come up with this goal of 12% income restricted housing. And so we're happy to report that the region is at 5.56% of unit housing stock at income restricted housing. And then at Longmont, we are at 6% of our housing stock is income restricted. So we need to our goal is to hit 12% by 2035, and we are about halfway there. With that 6% is about 2,845 units. As income restricted, 94% of that is in the rental space and 6% of that is in the for sale space. It was a big year for us in bringing deed restricted units to Longmont. We were able to generate 143 units that got COs this year, which is fantastic. The projects that are listed on the left side of the screen really highlight the ones that were able to bring COs and bring units to Longmont. But I do want to mention we did have a slight decrease in the percentage of income restricted units last year. So last year we reported that we were sitting at 6.18%, and this year we are sitting at 6%. So what we have figured out is that we had an increase in number of dwelling units in town by 3%. And so what's happened is that market rate unit generation has outpaced affordable unit generation. And so with that, we are going to have to generate 256 units this year and every year leading up to 2035 in order to hit that goal. All right, so then talking about our Prop 123 goal, so as was directed by this board in 2023, we committed to generate 304 new construction units by 2026. And with that, the rules of Prop 123 is that 60%, the AMI ranges need to be between 60% AMI and 100% AMI. So 60% AMI for rental and 100% AMI for sale. And so keeping that in mind as we talk about what's happening here. So if you look at the information on the left side of the screen, what you see is that since we've made our commitment in 2023 until today, we have actually generated 208 units here in Longmont, but 119 of them actually are counting towards our Prop 123 goal. And the reason for that is the way that the proposition is defining the AMI limits. And that happens. Every jurisdiction has a slight different way of defining that. But the chart on the right is actually showing what is in our pipeline. And so you can see we have a lot of projects, both market rate and affordable projects. Market rate that have affordable included, and then 100% affordable projects. And so what I want to note here is that all of these projects are really dependent on successfully completing their entitlements and reaching a certain point in the building permit process in order to be able to count towards that Prop 123 unit generation. So if they have any delays, we're at risk of not meeting our goal, of meeting our commitment. So just something to keep in mind over the next year and a half. And I know staff is working diligently to try to help these projects along and keep them on track as much as what's within our capacity.
I'm going to add one comment, because if you can go back real quick,
Yeah, no
Kayleen, just before we get too far along. This is something I just want the council to be aware of, that we're cutting it pretty close here. We need almost all of these projects to deliver on time in order to be able to meet that goal. We have some ideas for some quick turnaround projects if we needed to at the, as we're getting closer. We're looking at if we need to plan for this acquisition and conversion to deed restricted. That would be a quick way to get there if we're not looking like we're going to get there as we're getting into 26. Something else that we are preparing is if we need to advocate to the state about the methodology of the way they count. That's something we can plan for as well.
Molly, can you talk about the fact that when you look at the unit generation and the state's requirements, how it's different for us because of the naturally occurring affordable?
Yep. So the way that the state required all communities to come up with their goal is they measured census data, which means they are taking into account the snapshot of what affordability looks like in your community. Now that is primarily, almost by a vast majority, based on what they're calling naturally occurring affordable housing. This is not deed restricted affordable housing, but if you're in an area where rents are lower than other places in the state, then you actually ended up having a higher goal that you had to hit. So something that we argued from the beginning is you should really look at a community's capacity to generate deed restricted units and then tie that to the goal that you're supposed to meet. But the statute language limited that ability. So that is something that we've already been plugging, that if there was going to be a change in the statute language, that's where it should focus.
So when you look at our unit generation compared to other communities, our unit generation is actually pretty high. But because of the naturally occurring affordable in the calculation, it's creating a different challenge for us. And we know we're losing naturally occurring affordable housing just through market sales.
And we are not the only ones in this boat. Other communities that have had robust affordable housing programs in the past also had pretty high goals, just based on kind of the community makeup and the need and the 30 to 40 years of programs that were built to meet that need. The communities that have a pretty easy target are the ones that don't actually have naturally occurring affordable housing. So smaller communities, we know, for example, Erie's was only a couple of units that they needed. They've already met it, so.
All right, so moving on to really where I specialize, which is the inclusionary housing ordinance. So just as a reminder to this group, we have an ordinance here in Longmont that requires that any developer that comes in that's going to do any kind of residential needs to provide 12% of the total units as deed restrictive affordable or keep or select another compliance option. And so the goal here with these various compliance options that we offer is to really have like a healthy balance in the way that we select the different compliance options, because honestly, each one of our compliance options helps us meet that 12% goal in a variety of different ways, and it really does support the community. So we do an analysis every year to kind of see where they're falling and how the developers are selecting. And so as has been consistent many years, the fee and lieu still remains the most popular compliance option to select. But what's different is that it actually decreased in popularity by 16% this last year, which with that also resulted in on-site or an alternative option increasing, that compliance option increasing by 7%. So again, this is still like kind of an early trend. It's something that we're tracking, but initial feedback we're getting from the development community is, hey, the fee and lieu now is high enough that it's actually making on-site look pretty attractive when you pair it with all of the incentives that we offer. So we'll keep an eye on that, but so far initially it's looking fairly promising that we have achieved a potential balance here. So another analysis that we do each year is our fee and lieu projections. And this is developed through a lot of knowledge generated between myself, the planning department, and the building department. And so we take a look at where projects are in the entitlement process. We take a look at construction timelines, financing of when things are going to come into play, building permits. We put all of that data together. It generates some projections, and then we apply a pretty conservative lens to it before we present to you guys. So in 2024, we brought in $2.9 million in fee and lieu, but projections are showing that we do anticipate it to drop in 2025. And the reason for this is because we have fewer residential developments in our pipeline, and that can be just potentially correlated to sustained higher interest rates, both on mortgages and in construction lending. And then the full implementation of the fee and lieu, so people selecting other options. So these are the projections we have for this year, and just as a reminder to this group, these fee and lieu dollars are then put into the Affordable Housing Fund and then used in that leveraging concept that Christy brought in. So, all right, we also track our incentives and make sure that our incentives that we're offering here are nice and healthy and being used by projects. 3 projects used fee waivers in 2023, Village on Main, Wesley Townhomes, and Ascent at Hover. 10 projects in the entitlement pipeline are using land use incentives. Our most popular ones are going to be the preliminary plat waiver, Pocket Park, height and density bonuses has been the trend that we've seen. And then Wesley Townhomes was able to benefit from a local on-site securities waiver and was able to put about $136K back into their project. All right, so then accomplishments for 2024. The Housing Department and Planning worked really closely to make a bunch of code updates that improved affordable housing incentives that we brought to you guys towards the end of last year. The fee and lieu came into full effect. You guys adopted that in 2023, and now it has come into full effect. And then we have continued to work to align and automate the way that we do our fee and lieu projections to make sure that we're trying to provide you guys with the most accurate data possible. And then things that we're going to be working on and possibly bringing back in 2025 is we have a few remaining recommendations from that root policy study that was done in 2023 that we need to bring back to you guys. Staff's going to go ahead and analyze that, look at it a little bit more before we bring something back. So you may see something from us later in the year to address those last ones. We need to provide a bit more clarity on how our current fee waiver program is done. So we're going to do some code updates, cleanups, and some processes changes internally amongst staff. And then we noticed that we need to really start tracking emerging trends related to incentives for affordable housing for the infill development space. So that's the things you might see from us later on in the year. And with that, I think there is a public hearing that Kirsty's going to do.
Thank you, Kayleen. So we do need to hold the formal public hearing for our CAPER. That is part of our submission to HUD. And then, of course, happy to answer any questions on any aspect of the presentation.
Thank you. That was a lot. But I can tell you've been working really hard. Do counselors have any questions before we open up the public hearing? Counselor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck and staff for the very thorough presentation there. Couple clarifying questions, and one or two will build on the questions I sent via email as well, mostly just for public awareness on that. But first, just a numerical clarification. In the presentation, I think you said the fee in lieu percentage for, there was a pie chart. Yeah, so for 2024, it says 55.1% inclusionary housing compliance. Is that showing those who, that's showing, so the 55% is those who paid the fee in lieu, correct?
That is 51% of developers selected that option. So developers select their fee in lieu their compliance option in the entitlements process, and then they pay, if they like hypothetically picked the fee in lieu, they actually pay that over at building permit or CO. So these are
that shows the compliance method. So there's 55% there, and then in the memo that we got for the council communication, it said on page 7.
Did it say like 54%?
54%.
Power BI rounding, automated
okay.
rounding.
So-
So yes, it is 54%. I do know if you hover over the 51, it'll change on our dashboard.
Okay. So just wanted to make sure those were trying to get at the same number there.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Then on the next slide, I think it was a bar chart. Yeah. So this was on the fee in lieu projections, which I'd also asked via email. The non-linear nature of this is not a function of an ineffective policy, correct? It's more of a function of just the various fluctuations in the market and kind of when and what types of projects are proposed and actually are asked like to pay in that part of the process. Is that correct?
She has a much more eloquent answer.
I will accept a more eloquent answer. That's fine. Thank you.
You're perfectly eloquent, Kayleen. Yes, thank you, Councilor Popkin. So it really does have to do with the fact that development projects have a 3 to 6 year lead up timeline, really, from concept to entitlements, financial closing, construction, lease up. And so when we're getting a lot of pre-applications, for example, if folks are having their very first meeting with Kayleen and Planning and Building, they might not actually apply for their whatever planning process is required for months from then. And then that is however many months that planning process takes until they have building permit issuance, at which point, so the time in between they're selecting their inclusionary housing compliance option to when they actually might be paying fee in lieu can be over a year easily, sometimes longer. So we do see a lot of that lag due to the nature of kind of just the development cycle, particularly for 2025. We do think interest rates have significantly affected the commercial property market, especially interest rates on constructing lending right now are extremely high. You want to add?
What the data is specifically showing is happening in 2025 is council went ahead and gave a grandfathering period of time when we increased that fee in lieu. So you guys voted for it in 2023, and then developers had a year to get through their entitlements and be able to pay that old fee in lieu rate. And so that is what that's actually showing, is most of the projects that are going to be paying fee in lieu in 2025 will be paying that old rate. And then you see the projects in 26 and 27, they'll be paying the new rate.
So there's a bit of a lag in terms of exactly what gets paid when.
Yes, and we will continue to see that every 3 years we increase, hypothetically we'll increase the fee in lieu, or at least we'll present an increase to you guys to decide. So we could continue to see that.
Great. Thank you both. Sorry.
I was going to add, I think the thing when we look into the remaining part of 25 and 26 is macroeconomics and microeconomics, because as we look at projects, we're starting to see that impact in terms of, if you think of decisions on tariffs and things like that and what that means to actually the cost of materials. That's one side of the equation that can adjust a group's timing. Combined with interest rates, it's another timing adjustment, similar to what we saw related to coming out of COVID and supply chain issues and things. You see a throttling down, and so I don't think there's a lot of factors that go even beyond this that we're going to have to be really on top of as we look to the future, because there's so many things that we don't control that actually controls the timing of projects.
Got it. Thank you, all three of you, for very eloquent answers there. One more fee in lieu question, which is on, again, building off the email that I sent. We're looking at basically a downward trend of, or current performance of using the fee in lieu as the compliance method with the policy. So I'm wondering, is there an optimal balancing act there for fee in lieu that we're trying to get at in the market? Is that, like, for instance, is 40% compliance considered like the optimal of, like, okay, this is an option for developers who want to take that option, but largely we are getting into the right number of units that we're trying, or the right percentage of units that we're trying to get at? This may not be like an exact science here, and I'm just trying to get at, is that an art or a science?
Yeah, good question. I think public policy in general is a little bit of both. So we strive for a healthy mix of compliant options. And as I responded to your email, fee in lieu amounts really vary across cities in Colorado. Some are really nominal, some are higher than ours. And so it really depends on the individual local government's policy goals. What I think is a tell that our program is working is that the market is responding to policy changes, meaning we had Ordinance 0/2023-60, which almost tripled the fee amounts on a square footage basis, and we've seen the market has begun to respond to that. And so that shows you that, council's tweaking of the policy levers is in a close enough order to what the market is responding to that it's actually having an impact. So to your question, there's not an exact percentage of each compliance option that we strive for, but really a healthy mix. And as Kayleen mentioned earlier, each of the compliance options serves a different function. Fee in lieu is important because we can then use it to go take that leveraging and go get $80 more to build a project. But on-site is also really important. And also land donation options, which we are seeing more of, is really helpful because then we can take that cost out of a future project and have land banking opportunities, which as the city continues to build out becomes increasingly more valuable, right? Those infill parcels. So each compliance option is really beneficial in its own ways, and it's all about what does that mix feel right to council. But I think the fact that we're starting to see response in the market means that your tweaks are getting at the heart of it.
Great. Well, thank you. Super clarifying there. We talk a lot on council about kind of the housing market overall, and obviously a lot of what you presented on is addressing the housing needs that we have among certain residents. And so I want to commend all of the great work and immense work to support particularly residents in need with the funding and the strategies that we have in place. And not that everything needs to be boiled down to a leveraged dollar amount, but certainly the $1 of city funds for leveraging almost $80 of non-municipal funds is an incredible metric there, just to speak to the highly effective use of each dollar that we spend. So thank you very much.
Seeing no one else on council that has a question, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this presentation? Yes, come on down, Gary.
Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. This is great. I did not realize. Thought I was going to have to wait till second invited. All right, so I've been to many of these, heard many of these presentations on the affordable housing. And no one ever speaks to the impact cities' affordable goals have on the market rate properties. This effort that we're involved in massively does not happen in a vacuum. You push Push the guy down, it pops up somewhere else. So do we think it's possible to distort the market like we're doing and not accelerate increases in the market rate? Sorry, these are just a stream of comments I had when I was writing it down. So we're not being truthful with the public. It's dishonesty by omission to ignore the impact on the market rate housing. And I've asked several times, and I'm glad the presenters are here tonight, because I would love to see that, and it would be truthful, and the public could then make an informed decision about if we should be pursuing this. So please make at least some lip service toward it. So once we reach 12% across the city, then what? Do we think there'll be unicorns and rainbows at that point, or do we think there'll still be people showing up going, I can't afford to live here? I mean, is that, once we reach that end goal, do we just tell people, too bad, so sad, go away, we're at 12%? Fee in lieu, let's see. Often I say shifting the burden. We just shift it to other people, other groups. We don't alleviate a burden. So fee in lieu brought in approximately $3 million, or it's projected to. So nothing was brought in. It was taken by force from the developers. And what do we think happens at that point? Do they just give up that money? No, of course not. They spread it around to the market rate housing, driving it up. And so I just did some quick calculations. So 3.43 million across 100 properties is 34,000 a property. Across 250 properties, it's 14,000 a properties. Would the public be supportive of this if they knew they were paying an additional 30,000 for something? So Councilmember Popkin thanked for a thorough presentation. So respectfully, it's thorough only if we ignore the negative impact to 88% of those seeking shelter in this city. So let's see. Well, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Is there anyone else that would like to address? Seeing no one, oh, there you are. Okay.
If I didn't put my name on the paper,
Yeah.
You come on up. Or down.
Hi, I'm Nova Lee, 2400 17th Avenue.
Sorry, Mayor, I asked her to turn off the sound on the phone so she's
It's okay. Nice song.
Yes.
There you go. Okay.
Is this too close? Okay.
Can I have your name, please? And
Yes, Nova Lee, 2400 17th Avenue, Longmont.
sure.
So I don't have as much experience with financial analysis and the financial sector, so I can't speak on what that gentleman spoke about, or some of the more what's the word? Some of the more analysis parts of the presentation, but I did want to speak to the effect and the reason that we have these kinds of programs, these affordable housing programs. So something that was mentioned previously was that the market keeps, because of inflation, keeps driving up housing prices. And the reason that we have programs like these and the reason that they're so important, especially going forward with increasingly unstable political and economic projections due to hostilities with other countries, supply chain issues, tariffs, etc. I think it's really important that we remember that housing isn't like a horse that you buy and that is like something that you just like to enjoy to have. Housing is a human right. A lot of people don't treat housing like the thing that it should be in a society where it's one of the core tenets of why we do this. Like, we have society for the purpose of coming together to benefit each other and to keep each other safe. And housing and shelter is one of those things similar to food and medical care. And even if it was an expense, why is that seen as an expense instead of as a necessary fund that we have to pay to keep each other safe? That's all that I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to approach? Okay, Audrey? Can she sit in one of your chairs? Would that be okay? Thank you.
Last time walked into the microphone. No, thank you. I've
Okay.
been sitting all day. Okay. I'd like to speak about housing, please.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the suite, 2000 Sunset Way. If you can't hear me, let me know. My voice goes in and out once in a while. I have not been happy living there lately at all. I'm trying to move to Houston because of my health. When we had minus 20-degree temperatures this winter, I cried. I was hurting. I was in pain. I can't move. Nobody's letting me out of this. But I need to move for health reasons. I have to. I need to move to a warmer place.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado's always been my home, but I must leave it for health reasons. I cannot get out of my housing voucher because it's project-based. I've been on the wait list for 10 months. No, I'm sorry, I'm on the wait list at number 10. But I can't get any answers out of this. I'm waiting list for housing choice voucher that's portable. So I can move, but I don't think I'll ever get out of it. I need to move. I also need to move, be closer to my husband because his home office is in Houston. But main reason is I need to move for my health because of osteoarthritis, whatever it's called. I need to move. Please help me get out of this because I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford to move when it's time, but I need out. I can't do this anymore.
So can you sign to her that she can talk to Molly Donahue? O'Donnell. I like both those names. Okay. Thank you. Seeing no one else that would like to address council, I'm going to close public invited to be heard and ask for a motion to accept this presentation. Is that?
Just, Mayor, motion to direct staff to submit our caper to HUD.
Okay. I move that we direct staff to present their caper to HUD. Okay. So I moved it. It's been seconded by Councilor McCoy. I see Councilor Popkin.
Yeah, just one additional comment, building on a few threads from the public there that I want to just note. You know, there's obviously a cost to the programs that we run and the dollars that are used here. There's also a cost to not providing housing for people and a cost to letting the market not do that job as well. And there's a cost directly to the city and to taxpayers for that. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a complex system and that it is not just relegated to are we spending dollars on one particular program and the exact market. You know, this is not Newton's third law of action reaction. I think that was the third law. Whatever law, Newton's third law that was. This is not just action reaction. This is a complex system of housing costs, municipal costs, and social services that are overall provided to create a more stable community. So thank you for all the work that you do.
And thanks for that, Matthew. I want to add to that. Developers don't want to build affordable housing. It's not profitable for them at all. And that is why the county has looked at this and said we need to have affordable housing built. It's why the federal government funds it. And that's been that way throughout our history in the United States, is that government has been the source for funding, helping to fund affordable housing. So I believe in it. It's taking people off of our streets, which a lot of people complain about. So thank you very much for your work. Let's vote.
She voted yes. You voted yes?
So I think everybody voted yes. I can't see all of them. So that passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Our next one on second hearing is B 2025-21. This is a bill for an ordinance amending Title IX and Section 2.97.010 of the Longmont Municipal Code concerning management of plastic products and establishing enforcement provisions. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance or this bill? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2025-21. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion. Councilor McCoy.
I move that we move 10B 0-2025-21. OB.
Oh. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor.
Not 0.
By Councilor Popkin. Let's vote. You can't see mine? I'm a yes. So this passes 5-2 with 5-1 with Councilor Christ opposing and with Councilor Rodriguez absent. The next one on our list is 2025-22. This is a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2025. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2025-22. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2025-22.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And I'm a yes. And that passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent. We are now at items removed from the consent agenda, and I'm going to take them in alphabetical order, which the first one is B, and I think that was Councilor Christ. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. So last week we enjoyed an excellent presentation on the Tourism Improvement District and from our Visit Longmont professionals. And listening to the presentation, one would think, who wouldn't vote for this? I have utter confidence in the ability of Sarah Leonard and Dave Flugie, which is one of the reasons keeping marketing strategy regional and local is preferable to a global and national strategy, which is what the TID proposes to do. And also we'll probably use out-of-state marketing, which takes money out of our state. The current economic situation Longmont finds itself in is one of high inflation, reduced sales tax revenue, and reduced property tax revenue. We are behind budget in both categories. One very important thing Longmont can do to meet our budget expectation is to keep revenue local. It's quick to think we must keep up with our neighbors, such as Boulder and Fort Collins, and Denver also, I believe, has a TID. And they have a TID installed in order to increase local spending, is the stated reason. But during a period of inflation, the truth is many visitors reduce local spending after paying the TID fee. I have a business client who's booked 3 days in a town that has a TID. And the owner found a reasonable hotel close to business. After budgeting for the hotel and the lodger's tax, it was when the hotel prepared to charge his credit card that we found out about the extra $130 in charges for the TID. So this created a dilemma. Do we send one less employee? Do we change the per diem? That includes food and events. Or do we move to another hotel and pay more transportation? Or shorten the stay by 1 day? People that visit our city are going to have to make these same careful choices, and with TID. And Main Street businesses will not have the increased revenue from the tourism as we hope, at least not initially during these economic circumstances. Okay, additionally, Civitas, the company planning to administrate the TID, is as an out-of-state company. So per the proposed budget, 20 to 25% of the collected TID fees will go to California, where Civitas is located, for program management costs. This program, I think there's a time and a place for it, but I think it will be better timed when there's more disposable income in the pockets of consumers. So I move that we table the TID ordinance until September of this year, 2025, at which time the city may be in a better position to bear the costs and deal with the influences that are associated or required of a TID.
So Councilor Chris made a motion to table this 2025-24. Does she have a second? Councilor Yarbrough?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know how often you travel, but everywhere you go, pretty much, I don't know how many cities that have TIDs, but that's a cost so that cities can make money. I don't know if you understand I know you do understand. You know money. I'm not trying to take that away from you, but it is a way for us to make more money. And also, I know you mentioned that we will be going outside of the city for global tourism. I think that I know it brings in more money. So yes, that costs because you have to advertise and there's marketing and things like that. We want people to come to our wonderful city to visit and see all the wonderful and great things we have going on. So when they do pay that TID, that's more revenue for us in our city. I mean, I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but for me, it doesn't make sense. We are growing and we see, and I myself am a visionary, and I know that we're going to have more people coming into our city, and however we can get more revenue coming in, then that's how we should do it. And I think Visit Longmont is doing an amazing job in providing more opportunities for people to come here. And so that's why I'm not giving you a second. So I don't want you to think I'm not supporting you as a person, but I'm not supporting your idea. So.
Well, thank you, Councilor Yarbrough. I agree. Visit Longmont is a good group.
Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the intent of the motion here, but I disagree with what it actually does here and the effect. I mean, we heard directly from businesses that would be considering implementing this, and they wanted to do this, right? And so this is in response to Visit Longmont's ask and the business community here. It's not just the businesses that would be imposing this fee, but also the downstream local economy effects. So I can't support the motion there because I think that kind of is counterintuitive to what the actual intention of this partnership is.
Seeing no other comments on this, let's go through all of these and then make a motion to accept. Okay, one at a time. Make a motion to move B.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I move agenda item, consent agenda item B.
Where are we?
ordinance 2025-24.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy to move 2025-24, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And I'm a yes. I don't know why it doesn't show. So this passes 5-1 with Councilor Christ in opposing and with Councilor Rodriguez absent. The other thing I want to say, based upon this in a broader view, is that there are things that our residents want us to do, like a better swimming pool, fix our swimming pool, parks, another library, etc. But they don't want to be taxed to pay for that. So we do figure out other ways to get money into our city. It's not because we're sitting here making incredible amounts of money and just holding it, but everything that we have, that we do, is for the betterment of the city and for the residents. So I just want to put that in your heads when you say, when people think, oh, you're asking for this money, you want these people to pay this, you want this. But we can't grow amenities and we can't take care of basic services without getting more dollars into our city. Now, Councilor Popkin, you pulled D, E, and F. We can take them one at a time.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. You setting up a presentation or no? Okay. Wasn't sure what I was walking into here. So the reason I pulled D and E, they're both related to the bike share. And so I just have a couple questions related to the bike share generally, and then really no concerns here. I just wanted to make sure there's a clear understanding of where we go from here. So the first thing before I get into the questions, I just want to note that I think this was, a fascinating read of a lot of effort, clearly, not just from the city of Longmont, but in coordination with other municipalities in the region. And I think that is a really effective way to do this kind of a regional multimodal transportation option, or one of the modes of the multimodal strategy here, right? This isn't Longmont just doing one thing and hoping it plugs into other parts. This is making sure that we connect into the broader regional transportation system, in this case, in terms of bike connectivity and the options we're providing. I think it introduces a lot of other downstream opportunities that we can talk about at a later date as well. And Phil, you and I emailed about this a little bit as well. So I'm excited to open those doors when we come to them too. The first thing I just want to note, again, in the spirit of recognizing good city leveraging, if I'm recalling correctly, we are pulling just under $79,000 of city funds to leverage $1.5 million in state funds. Am I getting that correct?
Councilmember Popkin, I did want to just take a moment here just to introduce Kaylee Fallon, our new transportation planner with the city. She's been here almost exactly 6 months, so we're very excited to have her here this long, and I'm sorry that we didn't get her in front of you earlier, but I'm going to hand it over to Kaylee to answer the question for you. But I think to start it out is we are leveraging the dollars. Those are matching dollars, but when we move on to the next level of after these pieces are hopefully passed, that we can then move on to an IGA process with the other partners, and they will take care of a portion of that match as well. So the matching dollars that you see in this are the responsibility of Longmont today, but as we move to pick a vendor and then have more known costs, then we will work with the IGA intergovernmental agreement with the other partners that you've seen on the list, including Boulder County, Lafayette, Superior, Broomfield, and they will all come in to help us with those matching dollars.
So it's leveraging even more than what I was just speaking to. Is that correct, Kaylee? Welcome, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yes. Excellent. I think I mostly just wanted to understand what happens next here. So there's been a negotiation, if I understand correctly, there's been a negotiation with these multiple municipalities. That's what's led to this MOU. That's what's led to this collective grant effort as well. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing that. But just wanted to understand, once the MOU is signed and the request for proposal for procurement goes out, how does the city plan to determine the locations of where these docked bike share stations would be?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So it's really a multi-pronged approach, and we have some requirements in our scope with the CEO as well as some industry best practices. So I'll start with the industry best practices portion first. But for best practices, looking at the literature out there, so looking at NACDO's bike share station sitting guide and what that has to say about station locations there, and then also using the expertise of whoever the operator is. So you would have seen in the MOU that it is our intent to award an operator that has previous successful experience in bike share programs. So leaning on that vendor's expertise in terms of station locations, as well as our in-house expertise as staff members. You may be aware that Longmont did have bike share in the past, so we have had experience with station locations. So using what the vendor thinks and what staff think. So that's kind of the best practices approach. And then on top of that, like I mentioned, we have some requirements for station locations in the CEO scope. One of those requirements is that station locations have to prioritize disproportionately impacted communities. Those are defined by the Colorado Energy Office's EnviroScreen tool. So using that tool. The second requirement is that we have to have public input for the station. So the city, along with the project partners and Commuting Solutions TMO, will be doing community outreach to determine and get that feedback from the public. And then the third requirement from that scope is looking at transit and existing and future routes. So we do have to have station locations that prioritize that first and final mile connection to transit. So it's really a multi-pronged approach. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but those are what we'll be doing to determine locations.
Thank you, Kaylee. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the city's transportation mobility plan and the direction that's headed, and laid out in commendable detail the types of bike infrastructure investments. Bike share was not specifically talked about there because it wasn't, or not in as much depth there because it's kind of a separate process that's going. Makes sense. What really this is doing is taking advantage of and building upon those infrastructure investments that are planned and staged out at various short, medium, and long-term durations. So it's going to complement that work too, and really allow for more convenient, connected, and active transportation options. I've lived in, I've worked in, and I have visited multiple cities that have had effective bike share and e-bike share programs. Really excited to bring something here that is connected into the region as well. Thanks for all the work on that.
Councilor Popkin, do you want to make a motion for 2025-16? Oh, okay. Councilor Christ.
Kaylee, most of our RTD service is somewhat centralized within little wings that go out to, external areas, either in the south or sometimes up north. I'm wondering if you could give us an idea if the bike stations might be more at the perimeters of the city so that people can actually get to RTD service.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll go through that process that I just spoke to in order to determine those locations, and we'll also be prioritizing that BRT that's going to come online in 2026 and 2027 as well. So I think that we will be looking at the RTD connections, but we'll have to go through that process in order to determine the locations, and then, I think getting the public input as well will be a really important consideration for looking at how the public utilizes transportation and RTD services.
Because there are places where you can't get to a bus, and maybe it's more than a mile. So it'd be nice to be able to have that transportation solution.
Don't forget about Ride Longmont. We've got that one solved already. I wrote it 3 times today. Okay.
Right. Thank you for your work.
Get a motion, please?
Sure. I will motion to approve, let's see, item
2025-16.
Thank you. So moved.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Popkins, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry. Well, I thought it was 16.
No, it's 16. It's 16.
It is 16. So let's vote.
We'll get to 17 next.
Yes. And, okay, yes. And that
Okay.
passes unanimous, that passes 6-0 with Counselor Rodriguez absent. And now back to Counselor Popkin for 2025-17.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. One more question before I move on the same topic, unless there are other discussion items. In the MOU draft, I believe it spoke to, maybe this is a question for Phil or Kaylee. I know we emailed about this as well, on just the date and timing here. So the MOU spoke to the goal of, or the agreement to have the request for proposal process completed by December 31st, 2025. Can you clarify what you mean by completed in this context here? Is that signed contract? Is that procurement? Is that complete as a process, but the negotiations are happening? What does that specifically refer to? And then also, that feels like a pretty long leeway for kind of running an RFP process. And so I'm wondering if there's any intention or ability to do that slightly more efficiently.
Councilmember Popkin, just to let you know that December 31st, 2025 is a commitment by the whole group that we must get this done by that time. But the more realistic piece of this is that we're working on the RFP now, and we're getting that out to the group. So we hope to have a vendor selected by summer of this year. So much ahead of that timeline, or that kind of fence that we're trying to put up that we don't want to cross. So it'll be before.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. And just then to clarify what the completion of the RFP means, is that signed contract by the date that you were just describing, or the time window?
Definitely to have a signed contract by then with a vendor, yes. And
Great.
we're going to work through the BVA process, so that's a very, very rapid process and very blind, so that there'll be no bias in that process. So we're very excited about that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those clarifications. Seeing no other council member comments, I will move to approve R 2025-16, a resolution. Of this law.
17.
17. Thank you. 17. A resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the memorandum of understanding concerning a regional bike share program.
So moved by Counselor Popkins, seconded by Counselor Crest. Let's vote. I'm a yes.
That sounds like a song, Mayor.
I am a yes. So that carries 6-0 with Counselor Rodriguez absent. I'm getting tongue-tied up here. Counselor Popkin, you have the very last one, 2025-18.
I did, and I should be able to keep this pretty brief.
Okay, that's good.
Great. Hello, Teresa. I sent you a few questions via email as well, and I appreciated the clarifications you responded to there. The first was clarifying what outside events refers to on Article 1.1C in terms of the LDDA kind of collaboration here. And from your response via email, you clarified that the intent is to attract people, businesses, and others from outside of downtown or outside of Longmont to host events. Is that correct?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Teresa Malloy, Chief Financial Officer. Yes, that is correct, Councilmember Popkin.
Great. I had also asked about Article 1.1.m that stated that the DDA will do all things necessary, proper, advisable, or convenient for the accomplishment of the above purposes in context there of all the requirements that are laid out in this IGA, this intergovernmental agreement. My question, and this will go to the attorney here, because I do want to parse words for this for a moment. The words, the way that this is structured is that it says the LDDA will do all things necessary, proper, advisable, or convenient. And is that an and? Is that an or? Can the counterparty here get away with just doing convenient things? Is this a figure of legal terminology that I don't understand in context here? Please, I'd appreciate if you could shed light on the context of this.
Councilmember Popkin, Eugene May, City Attorney. So yes, you are shaking the establishment. This is a term of art that I've seen in legal contracts. The intent of paragraph M is a catch-all to allow and explicitly authorize the DDA to fulfill the purposes above. I actually looked. The word convenient is also used in the TID ordinance as the catch-all for them to do all things necessary. I don't know if it's exactly the same, proper, and I think the or is they can do necessary things, proper things, advisable things, or convenient things. It's not in its own category.
Okay.
And would
it's when you say
imply you have to do all four at
correct,
once?
and would imply you have to do all four, or implies you could just do one.
Yes, you could just do it if it was convenient to accomplish the above purposes.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out what is maybe advisable and convenient in this situation to do here. Is this language that is standard in city intergovernmental agreements and we haven't had an issue with? Or is there any concern here that this would just create a convenience loophole? I'm just trying to avoid a problem down the road.
I think it is and has been in IGAs. I don't know if it's particular to IGAs. I think it's a contractual term of art for catch-alls.
Okay. I'm not an attorney, but it feels like a slightly flawed catch-all term of art. This is just to confirm on the process here. So this intergovernmental agreement would be approved for this year, correct? And then we would rediscuss this next year?
Correct.
If we wanted to continue it.
They are annual contracts.
Okay. So then I won't rustle the establishment here, but what I'd suggest to staff is that we, and to my fellow council members, is we keep an eye on what is done in convenience, if that is at all used in that way or abused in that way. I highly doubt that will be the case, but it stood out to me as an interesting use of the or plus convenience clause. So I suggest we pay attention to that this year, see if there's any concern with that, and revisit that next year if there is potential concern. If not, we don't need to fix what ain't broken.
Will do.
Thank you. And then the last question, Teresa, probably for you again. Article 4.G.1 discusses periodic reporting. And just wanted to know if you could clarify what periodic means. What should we expect from periodic reporting here?
You bet, Councilmember Popkin. So in regards to reporting from the LDDA, that is monthly. That is financial information that is provided to the LDDA board monthly. I am a member, ex officio member of that board, and so I do receive that financial information on a monthly basis.
Okay, and so when you see periodic reporting, you understand that to mean this monthly reporting?
That is correct.
Okay. Won't ruffle feathers here either. I would just say if this is an issue going forward in the subsequent contract, we take a look at just making less vague language in the future. Cool.
Thank you.
With that, I see comments, so I will reserve my time.
I have a quick question, and maybe you can help, Teresa, or maybe this is for Kimberly. But I didn't see the 4th of July celebration included in this contract, although I had businesses down in the LDDA district asking, would we be doing that again? And who would be the point person for it? And I would just like to be able to respond to those businesses.
And I will let Kimberly take that one.
Okay, thank you, Teresa.
Do you want me to take it? Sure. So if you're referring to what we did last year, yes, that is our recreation department that is doing that in partnership with all of our partner groups. So I think they're talking to Kimberly. I know Sarah. I saw Sarah. They're going to talk to her. But that's something that the city did, and so it's our recreation staff that's taking the lead on that. And I think it's going to be Sam.
So I would refer them to
Sam Calhoun.
Sam Calhoun.
And
Okay.
just a hint, it's going to be, I think, bigger this year because of
It is too.
the success that we had last year. So, but that's the city that's doing this.
Yeah, and I'm glad people are asking questions now.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I would like to.
That's why I had.
I'd like to move our 2025-18.
Seconded.
Okay, it's 2025-18 has been moved by Councilor Chris, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that passes. Yes. 6 to 0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent. Whew. Councilor Popkin, I just want to say publicly that I appreciate your need to educate yourself on all these issues. I'm serious. And that is exactly what we were looking for when we appointed someone. So thank you very much. We are now on to general business. And the first one is changes to the City of Longmont's Human Services Funding Program. And we have Christina Pacheco coming down. And Alberto. I know.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. I'm Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director. I'm here tonight with Eliberto Mendoza, our Human Services Manager, and we're going to present some information regarding changes to our Human Services Agency Funding Program, which Eliberto manages. We included the why behind the reason we brought this in front of you tonight in your packet, but we also wanted to point out some specific information in a short presentation. Oh, what happened? Oh, there you go. There we go. So our resources have increased in this area. The percent of general funds set aside and total dollar amount really has increased from the time period of 20 to 2025. It should be noted that in 2022, we got back to 2017 funding levels after the decision was made to split the fund into nonprofit human services agency funding and housing stability, where we fund programs that address homelessness and homeless prevention. The human services funding gap grew tremendously between 2023 and 2024 and remained consistent into 2025. However, if you look at that whole 5-year period, the gap has significantly increased overall. The 2025 Human Services Fund round demonstrated the ongoing need presented by local nonprofits. The number of agency and program requests have grown. Agencies grew from 46 to 54 and programs from 50 to 62. What this tells us is that the need far outpaces the amount of general fund we have available to allocate. There also was an increase in the number of agencies and programs funded from 2020 to 2025. And you'll see the line graph there. One of the thoughts that Eliberto often brings up when we talk about the trends we see is whether or not we want to fund an inch wide and a mile deep, or a mile wide and an inch deep. This is what staff considered as we prepared the different funding models for your packet. We know that keeping our finger on the pulse of what nonprofits are faced with is very important. We'll continue to hold nonprofit engagement meetings and have done that over the last 2 years. In fact, we had a virtual meeting on March 14th with over 50 nonprofit representatives in attendance. What we heard is that they appreciated the transparency and collaboration. Some of the ideas that they presented aligned with what staff is presenting tonight. They also offered other alternatives, and some focused on really looking at funding cuts and impacts that nonprofits are facing at the federal, state, and local levels. Staff is committed to continuing to hear about the needs through these nonprofits, through these engagement sessions, and will continue to work with Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board to be part of that feedback loop. Our plan is to have subsequent follow-up with our advisory board in April to operationalize council's direction should you decide to make changes. So with that, that concludes our short presentation, and we're ready for what's going on here, for any discussion, any questions that you may have.
So Christina, let me see if I understand correctly. I get that it's rising with less dollars, the need. Can you give your opinion as to why, based either on data or what you are seeing?
Well, I will address a piece of that, and then I'd like to turn it over to Eliberto to add to that. We're seeing more successful grant applications. The city and the county provide grant training opportunities for organizations in grant writing, basically. So I think that that's one piece. The other piece is that there are more agencies that are being funded and more programs that are being funded. I think it is the second piece to that I can refer back to with that specific question. Do you have anything you want to add?
Mayor Peck and Council, the only thing else that I would add is that we're also just seeing a growth in the amount of need. We had a conversation about housing earlier, the rising cost of rent and housing costs, and the rising food insecurity that we're experiencing. So it's a combination of our nonprofits are getting more savvy, which is great to see them increase their technical aptitude as far as writing grants. But it's also a reality that they're seeing more need come through their doors as well. And while, it is totally appreciated that council moved up the funding. So I was here when we, our Longmont Housing Human Services Advisory Board, petitioned this council to go from 2.37 to 2.75 to ultimately 3% to get us back to those 2017 numbers. And that was really helpful. But I think as time has gone by, we just see continuing growth and in the need that our nonprofits are seeing and the number of clients are seeing as well.
So a follow-up question then that I have is based upon the fact that you said more nonprofits are learning and writing more grants. Is that filling part of the gap that we don't need as a city need to fund deeper?
Mayor Peck, that's a great question. I think we'd need to look at, and we do as part of the funding process, look at how organizations are funded just across the board. Part of what we've been working on in our nonprofit engagement sessions is really looking at and encouraging nonprofits to leverage the work that they're doing in the community. So, for example, we have 50 some odd organizations that are funded. A large percentage of organizations all pay for IT. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we have talked with organizations about is how can you leverage that? Is there some sort of collaboration that you can have across nonprofits in order to partner to fund your IT services, for example, mm-hmm. and then that could potentially free up line items in your budget to cover other things. And so I think it would be a matter of looking at how agencies are funded across the board, but then also looking at areas that they can leverage the work that we're doing. And we're going to continue to encourage that in our ongoing meetings with them.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. And my next question, and then I'll turn it over to the light that's on here. My next question is, when they come to you for funding, and I think I know this answer, Do they need to bring their work plan, their budget, what are they spending it on, their deficits, okay, good.
Yes, Mayor Peck,
Okay.
absolutely, and that's a piece that Eliberto goes through fine tooth comb, looking and has questions prepared for our funding hearings.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
So in looking at the needs, thank you, Mayor. In looking at the needs and the asks of the nonprofits when they're making their applications, does some of this have to do, and again, this is one of those, it's factual or perception. What I'm hearing is that a lot of people aren't donating as much to nonprofits that they used to, so that those donation pieces aren't there. As well as the cost of overhead for renting the space or leasing the space that they're using, or even trying to acquire a location.
Councilmember Hidalgo Ferring, you're absolutely correct. I think it's all of those things.
Okay, and then I guess kind of, looking at, because I did speak with Alice from Hope, and just kind of working my way to get around to different nonprofits and kind of ask, get a sense of what is the reality for nonprofits. And, I also see a greater number of people also tapping into those resources, where in the past maybe it wasn't as heavily, people weren't heavily dependent on those resources. But also, I've noticed over the years that people know that there are these resources that may have been around and people didn't really know about them. So I think the communication as well is getting out there, and there's a lot of interconnectedness between the city, the district, other doctors' offices, salud, and getting that information out to the residents. So I think that has helped, but it's also created that impact to how do we fund and how do we support our nonprofits locally?
Correct. Yes, we are seeing an increased need across the board.
But I want to echo Councilmember Faring's or Mayor Pro Tem's statement. We've had conversations with agencies, and we are seeing more agents apply because they hear about this funding and they want to apply and access it. So yes, we are seeing that more and more often. We had so many applications this year. We had to pre-screen some out because to make sure that they fit in with our priorities. But yes, we are seeing more people apply on a year-by-year basis.
And Mayor, if I can jump in, I think it's not, what they're talking about is not unlike what we got into when we started absorbing the housing authority. It's the same factors that we were digging into, where we were really seeing, well, how's overhead driving the cost of that organization? How do you maximize your efficiency and effectiveness to reduce your overhead costs so you can move money into then your operational piece? They're hitting on all the issues. You all are hitting on all the issues. It's when you look at it, you have more organizations, you have more programs, you have higher cost of rent, lower donations. Twice you will hear this, you have macro and microeconomics now starting to come into play, where what are the decisions that are being made at the federal level in terms of the funding and how that's going to be filtered down into then the states? How is the funding then filtering in from the states down into the local governments? When in reality, from a budget perspective, you all have been through 2 budgets recently where we're all dealing with the same thing in terms of our revenues adjusting and our expenditures increasing. And if you put it into perspective, in our last budget, there was nothing that we didn't add anything really to that budget because we were trying to cover our overhead costs associated with health insurance increases generally. And so we're all feeling the same impacts, and it's showing itself in different ways. It's really the 1,000 cuts that everybody's going through right now in terms of all of these headwinds coming at us.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Alberto and Christina, thank you so much for everything you do. I mean, I know from being on that board when I was years ago, and I know that it's a working board that goes out and visits these different nonprofits and looks, and they dig through it, and it's a hard choice. Your recommendation was to go with Model 2, the 3-year rotational aspect. You don't think anything's going to be missed in there?
So Councilmember McCoy, to just recap, yes, Model 1 was setting funding based on priority. Model 2 was the 3-year rotation. And then Model 3 was basic needs only, core services RFP. And so, the drawback or the challenge of Model 2, yes, we are recommending that model, is that it would exclude agencies the first and second years. However, what we did hear from nonprofits is that the request for longer-term contracts and funding. And so while that would be the drawback, a positive part of this model is that agencies could plan for their budget 3 years in a 3-year time frame. And so there was, this actually was one of the ideas that was brought forward by 2 or 3 nonprofits, right? In our
So we
meetings.
don't drop them necessarily. We fund them. We just don't change their funding based on any changes for 2 years. So otherwise, they stay funded. They just don't make any advances. This also probably encourages them to maybe go out and seek other funding sources if there's a deficit.
That could be a potential. Yeah.
So I want to jump in just because of a statement you just made, is that, and why I asked, do you look at their plan? Do you look at their budget? Do you look, because if they aren't running a program that works, no, we're not going to fund them.
Right.
I mean, we just can't fund a bad program. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask about the different models too, and I know you all recommended Model 2. However, so much happens in the 3 years that can happen, and so is there a way we can do, like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking about, I do understand with the first model how some organizations get more funding and some get none because of that model. However, priorities are very important to the board because they're the ones who go through all of them and weigh them and all of those things too. I mean, and for us as well, for our community. I guess just my concern is the 3-year rotation. We just never know what's going to happen within the 3 years. None of us know. And how can we ensure that their needs are, as much as we can, their needs are not provided? How can we ensure that their needs are provided? How can we ensure that 3 years from now, and I do like the fact that they do have to fill out those applications, and but then at the same time, right now, people are in need right now, and for them to wait for 2 years, I don't know. For me, I just feel like it should be a mix of both model and one and 2. I don't know if you all talked about that. I mean, it's hard. That is one of the toughest boards that I sat on, making those decisions on who gets what, how much, I know that there's a rubric and all of that, but it's just really hard because you want to give everybody and you just don't have enough funding to support those. So I was looking at the first and the second model. Is there any way we can kind of mix?
So we came tonight with suggestions, but also an open mind. So we are having a special meeting on April 19th with our board to talk about this, and so we can go back and look and bring to the board, whatever combination of ideas or recommendations that you all have. We brought forth model too, because we, like I said, that came from the nonprofits directly, because of their desire for that. Right now, currently, these are annual agreements that they sign. They have to reapply every year, and our application is not a simple application.
Right.
It is a long application, so it takes a lot of their staff time, and so they appreciated the idea. And of course, they would have to turn in, whether it was 1 year or 3 years, they'll still have to do annual reports, where we get to see, their outcomes and questions, and we would build into those agreements the opportunity to, what Mayor Peck said earlier, really that progress monitoring. So if we have a program that's not succeeding, we can have those conversations about whether, about the funding. But yeah, I believe that we can go back and look at 1 and 2. We were just wanting to make sure that we brought forward what we heard at those meetings.
And as you should. And I'm just thinking about those who are barely hanging on.
Right.
That's all,
Absolutely. With council's direction, we can go back to our advisory board and operationalize the decision that you make tonight. Either one of the 3 options or continue the same course. Either way, we will work with our advisory board to make sure that work gets done.
I think you could blend the two if you said, because one's really priority based, and you could say, here's the priority based rubric, and in this case, we do feel that it's appropriate to have more consistency in funding because it's such a high level of a priority for us. We want consistency there, and you could take a percentage of the funding that you apply to that. And then you could have another percentage of the funding that's not on the 3-year rotation, but that is more on the yearly rotation, where you're blending the 2 concepts together. I think it is doable.
Absolutely.
If that's what you wanted to look at as a body, where you're bringing both concepts, but you have another piece that's there to support people on an annual basis.
That's just my suggestion. Like the Hour Center and Together, they're going to be that 3-year rotation. But there are some that are barely hanging on that need some funding that hit those priorities too. And how can we support them and keep them, help them to keep going, to be sustainable, as they are looking for other funding as well. That's my frame of thought, and of course, it's the rest of the councilor have to agree with that.
Well, there's probably some historical context in this conversation. So there was, shortly after I got here, that there was a similar conversation with council, and the way the process worked then is people would just apply, and they would assess the applications. There wasn't really categories defined in terms of what we needed, and the council at that time, really created the process that we're in now, where it was a priority-based system, where they said, X amount needs to go to unhoused, X amount goes here, and then you had the annual applications. And so I wanted to say that because I don't think anyone on this council was here when they made that decision, but it was really, the council at that time said, we kind of know generally, globally, community, what we're struggling with, and we want to be very directive in where we're putting our funding to deal with those significant issues. So I wanted to drop that historical context in to understand. We went from anyone could apply for anything to then more of a directed concept of here are the big issues we're trying to deal with as a community. So I think you're seeing the evolution now in terms of needs starting to slide in, and do we adjust or tweak this a little bit?
And it was based on the social determinants of health is how we got to where we are now.
Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Largely want to build on where Councilmember Yarbrough is going with this, but first, I just want to acknowledge, I think this is probably the hardest topic in our entire agenda today. And I think it's the most challenging one here, and I don't know if there's a perfect solution. I appreciate the multiple options you brought forward here. My understanding from our email conversation is that the Housing and Human Services Board does not have an opinion yet on this. So I'd be curious what they would recommend at some point too. I like the potential direction of the combo approach. I wanted to offer, for lack of a better term, let's call it the staggered approach as another option. And what that is basically taking this rotation approach of option 2, and if we call it, if we just say 3 categories, for instance, just to make this easy to map out, you'd fund categories 1 and 2 in year 1, then 2 and 3 in year 2, and then 3 and 1 in year 3. So it's like, yes, there would be one priority or one set of priorities that isn't funded in that off year, but there would be 2 periods of the 3 where they could apply. And so it doesn't create this kind of void as you go through the cycle there. It would be a little bit less money each year that would be available, obviously, for each of those groups or clusters of priorities. But it wouldn't, if there is a more imminent reaction that is needed from one sector of our city or one type of services, the nonprofits services that are provided, it would allow a little bit more agility to jump in so that there isn't a 2-year gap in the cycle there on priority. So I wanted to just put that on the table as another way to kind of augment option 2 here, but with a little bit more flexibility while still respecting a slightly reduced administrative burden of an annual application cycle.
Right.
So I wanted to offer that as an option. It sounds like you're taking notes and going to discuss it with the board. So I think that kind of staggered or layered approach could potentially keep with the intent that I think staff is going for here of option 2 or model 2 of that rotation with a little bit more agility to meet the needs of the community if conditions change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Popkin. I would add, and then I'll pass it over to Eliberto, that in December of 2023 and then again in May of 2024, we did bring this forward to our advisory board, talked about just the trends that we were seeing, presented much of the same data. At that point, they decided not to make any changes. And so this is something that we continue to talk about, that we continue to review in advisory board meetings, and actually invited our advisory board members to be part of the meetings that we've had with nonprofits. So several have been a part, just to keep them in that feedback loop.
Yeah, and to be clear, I wasn't suggesting they weren't involved in this, just that there wasn't a universal perspective yet from the advisory board, correct?
Absolutely. I just wanted to kind of lay
I
out
appreciate that.
exactly what our email interaction.
Yes, of course, thank you.
And Christina just said exactly what I was going to say. Our board is involved, and we've had conversations. We're coming to council for just some further guidance. But yes, we have a very engaged board who does very hard work, and we've had these conversations for quite some time, and we're just coming to council to get some more direction as well.
Great. Well, thank you both.
Councillor Christ.
These are all great ideas, and I just want to acknowledge that the private sector has felt these constraints as well. And something that has come up there is a lot of businesses are resource sharing. You know, for instance, can't afford the full employees, so they share half and half, or share equipment, machinery, especially some of the soft services. So I guess we call that service stacking. So I think that falls in line with what the other councilors are suggesting, in that, you know, there's a hybrid here that might work. One of in the engineering sector, they of course have an adherence to Albert Einstein, and he once said, if you've got 60 minutes to solve a problem to save your life, take 55 minutes to define the problem and 5 minutes to solve it. So I think all this discussion is going to lead you to the right path. I've read through the 3 models, and I agree with Councillor Popkin and also with Councillor Yarborough that there's no real good choice here, but maybe some resource sharing would help you get a little more depth without having to completely narrow your applicants. And that's what I've got. I think in a way you can't go wrong also. Maybe whatever you try, you'll get some feedback and you'll find out what works and what doesn't work. But the cost there might be that some people that are just hanging on might not make it. So if there's a way to be able to keep people at a, stay afloat level, maybe put that in first and then see what you have left. And if you can resource stack somehow.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Christ. I think that we can definitely explore that, and that goes along with what we have been talking with nonprofits about for the last 2 years. What are ways that they can leverage what they're already doing to save money on their bottom line, whether it's, human resources, in the area of human resources, in the area of technology. We have a whole list of ideas that nonprofits, that was one of the questions that we asked in our World Cafe model. Like, what are ways that you can leverage the work that you're doing? Give us some ideas about that. So we can definitely continue to go down that road.
Okay. Good work. Thanks for bringing this to us.
One more, Councillor McCoy.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Peck. So the council options, we see them there. What we're really seeming to be coming together on is provide staff with further direction. And do you think you have it?
Yes, in terms of resource sharing and coming up with the hybrid of 1 and 2 is what I'm hearing.
Do we need to have a vote on this, Mayor?
The staggered approach, I was going to mention that as well. But here's my question in using that. So let's say this year you use all of your funding and narrow it down to 3-year increments. But then the next year you will have funding as well. It won't be, the first group won't get it, but the next year it will be another 3-year increment with what you've got.
Right.
So it's, when you say that every year it would be less and less, not necessarily, because you'll have a smaller pot of people, organizations
Right.
that are asking.
They could
Okay.
potentially get more. Right.
Exactly. They would be on a 3-year, I don't know, path.
Yeah, 3-year or 2-year,
Whatever.
as I've heard, mentioned here.
So
tonight.
I want you to put that one in as well, the staggered with 3-year. So I think that is there any other direction that we want than the staggered approach, the hybrid approach, and resource stacking? Is there anything, does that pretty much cover it?
I think so. That's what I was asking.
We don't need a motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
So you'll bring back, I'm sorry, we don't have a
Nope, that's okay.
direction.
That's okay.
Yes.
We'll bring back this model.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think what this will be really helpful for is for our April 19th meeting when we can, dive deeper with our advisory board and say, here's what council is some of the recommendations that council gave, and then once we work with them to operationalize it, we can, if we need to, we can come back and present that to you all as well as an information item.
Great.
Yes, you'll hear back from us late April or May.
Okay.
Before the funding cycle opens.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, I am going to move that we recess as the Longmont City Council and convene as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1. All right. I moved that. Councilor McCoy seconded it. Any questions? Seeing none, let's vote. I'm a yes. And that passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent. And so here is the resolution. It's LGID 2025-01. It's a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for general administrative services. Are there any questions from council? Do we need, I see Kimberly, do you have any comments to make, or you're good? Okay. Seeing none from council, I'm going to open up the public hearing on 2025-01. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this ordinance or resolution? I'm sorry.
There's no public hearing on this.
Oh, I'm so used to do that.
No,
Yes, we are very confused. No, these are, okay. Okay, right now.
You need a motion, Mayor?
Yes,
I move,
to pass.
R-LGID-2025-01.
I'll second that. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by myself to move resolution 2025-01. Let's vote. Director. I've been up a long time, ladies and gentlemen.
No one's picking it.
And mine's a yes. And that passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
I move we adjourn.
Second,
All right, it's been moved.
The board of directors.
as the Board of Directors of the General
Improvement District. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring that we,
What is our title to this?
Director.
Directors.
The motion has been moved by Director McCoy, seconded by Director Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. I'm a yes. And that carries 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent. And now we are here welcoming Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar for our 2025 legislative bills.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, members of council. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and we got quite a few little ones today.
Yeah.
So I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. The first one is Senate Bill 132 concerning spirituous liquor manufacturer authority to conduct tastings. Basically, what this bill does is essentially turn breweries and tasting rooms into full bars. Without the requirements for food, but they are able to, if this bill were to pass, they would be able to sell liquor from other manufacturers, not just the things that they're making in their own spaces. And like I said, there's no requirement for food or for local licensing authorities. So from our perspective, certainly this doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't line up with the way that state does bar licensing today. I think that you do want your local liquor authority to be part of this process. And so for these reasons, the staff is suggesting that the council oppose Senate Bill 25, 132.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Chris to oppose SB 25-132. Seeing no discussion, let's vote. I know. I oppose it. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. The next one is Senate Bill 25-161 concerning transit reform, creating study planning and reporting requirements really geared towards RTD. There's a whole list of things that this bill would do, and I think it still has maybe some wording issues, and people are still working through it. But in essence, since transportation is such a high priority to the City Council, this legislation creates efficiency and accountability for RTD and promotes local and regional transportation. Staff recommends that the City Council supports Senate Bill 25-161.
Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I had a question for you, actually, as our RTD board member. generally, there was discussion in the Colorado Municipal League Policy Committee to support this. I believe that was their position. And generally, there were questions about, like, is this accountability committee redundant with what the board already does? So I'm just curious if you could shed a little bit more light on kind of your role there and the board's role there and the potential value you could see in this.
Okay, I'm glad to see this bill come forward with the amendments that everyone that I know has put in, tons of amendments. Basically, it is a bill that the governor wants to hold RTD more accountable, because at this point they are not. When you talk about the accountability board, a panel, this is what I think it's going to be. They're going to be, people on the panel will be pulled from other transit agencies, from Dr. Cog, from the public, it'll be a very eclectic panel to hold them accountable. Well, I don't know what it's going to look like yet.
You think that in concept, though, that'll be productive?
I'm hoping.
Okay, fair enough. Cool, thank you.
I never say anything that's going to be perfect there with RTD. So
fair enough.
So I move that we support SB 25161. It's been moved and it's been moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that's a yes for me. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. The next one is House Bill 25-1096 concerning automated permitting for residential clean energy technology projects. This bill was amended today or this week to basically remove munis out of this bill, so I'm not asking for a position at this time. The next one is House Bill 25-1158 concerning measures to enhance the integrity of digital education materials in public schools. At first, I didn't think this really had a whole lot of nexus with the city, but I certainly spoke with our library staff who felt that it really did, because we have so many agreements with the school district on how the library is used, and that there's all kinds of different programs that are joint programs, that any kind of restriction on the data in public school libraries probably will begin to roll over to the relationship with our public library. And so at least our library director was extremely concerned that the partnership that between us and St. Vrain would be compromised by this bill, mostly because there's just a lot of red tape around what kinds of books you can keep in there. Some people are saying that this will be used to hold down particular authors or, different kinds of materials, because the requirements are going to be so stringent for what is approved. And so since that partnership is really critical towards our students, staff recommends that City Council opposes House Bill 25-1158.
Councilor Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to address some of the conversations, and I'm glad you mentioned the library and that you had spoke with John. We did discuss this at our library advisory board meeting, and he addressed some of those implications, and also, as we are moving towards more this digital world, and I had a chance to speak with the one of the authors of the bill on Lobby Day, and her concern was more about the advertising piece. And so my pushback was, okay, who oversees this? Who is going to determine the compliancy? How will that be? Then would it fall on the teacher? Would it fall on the library staff person who distributes or shares this content, and a student comes across it, and then they have these external links? So, just as you're reading through an article, and there might be a highlighted link. Oftentimes those links reference the article, so it takes you to the article where that particular topic was referenced. So those things then would be prohibited. If there were additional ads, and I'd be all for that. However, it's so it becomes then an example of unfunded mandate, because then people you know, the district or the city or whichever entity is distributing this these documents or these digital resources, and it would be the schools, they're having to pay for the oversight to that. So that's, I feel like there were a lot of unintended consequences. They did, I know that when it was in committee, they were kind of watering it down. When I spoke with our CEA lobbyist, they were pretty certain that it's probably going to drop, but I really, I would advise that our council, the city, oppose this.
I do think it's one that's not hitting very many municipal kind of dockets because it says it's for public schools. But if you think about it, to be
There's a
able
lot
to
of
say,
overlap.
there is, and we have so many different agreements that really, truly, the library is not going to restrict any of those kinds of data pieces if they have links or ads, because we can't. I mean,
You
our
can't.
library is a free and open library.
Yes.
So it almost immediately severs that relationship with St. Vrain.
Yes, because it puts the district in a
That's right.
liable, and as well as us, we don't want to get tangled in those pieces. So yeah, I
very
did share that I
well-meaning.
was unhappy with this, and it was a good intention.
Yep.
However, speak to the people who are impacted, please. That would be your school district people. That would be your librarians. People who have these contracts. So that's what I said.
Good intentions, but yeah, I think you're right.
Be
the
smart.
unintended
So yeah, so I
consequences.
do make a motion that we oppose this this bill.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor McCoy, that we oppose HB 251158. Let's vote. Yes. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. The next three are some housing bills for you, which of course housing is always fun in the legislature. This next one is House Bill 25-1240, which is concerning protections for tenants who use housing subsidies. There's a list of things that this bill does, things like limiting late fees to $20 for a voucher holder, things like limiting $5,000 in damage and civil penalties if there's something that were to happen. In the opinion of our housing folks, this is something that would make useful clarifications for those tenants without putting too much burden on the landlords. And that really is kind of the balance that housing bills need to strike for these things to pass. And so their suggestion was that the City Council supports House Bill 25-1240 because housing is such a critical priority for the City Council.
Councilor Christ?
Sandy, my concern is this would make ADUs a little bit more difficult. For one, you've got new landlords, basically, who hadn't really rented before. And also because sometimes those ADUs might not meet the qualifications for housing choice vouchers. And they may not pass inspections and what have you. And I just would, it's also, private property we're talking about here when you've got a landlord. So I actually don't support this bill.
Councilor Christ, are you referring to, and I forgot the word. Tell me what you're referring to. What kind of renters? What are they accepting?
It's housing choice vouchers.
I know what I'm thinking of, but it isn't coming to mind. Yes, Section 8. Is that what that's
It's the same
referring
thing,
to then?
yeah. It's
Okay.
the same thing. right?
Okay.
So it's limited to this particular program. It's not all landlords and all tenants. It's limited to this people who are using
Right.
housing choice vouchers or Section 8 housing.
Okay. And that's what the ADUs would only be using Section 8.
No, well,
Is that correct?
there's actually requirements under the HCV program in terms of you have square footage requirements and you have other issues. And then under the HCV program, you inspect it. And so that is a separate issue
Okay.
from this legislation.
Okay.
Because that's the rules for that program in terms of what is a suitable house, what does that mean? That's all in the HUD world.
Okay.
And so in this case, an ADU that doesn't meet the standards you
Wouldn't
couldn't
be
even
able
use a
to. Couldn't
do
voucher
it either
on
way.
that ADU.
Okay.
Right.
But I understand that this bill says that all landlords have to accept them, so that means they have to at least allow applications and go through that process, which
Yes,
can be
they-
cumbersome.
That's true, and that is one piece of the bill, that it makes all landlords, regardless of the number of housing properties, prohibited from denying a household because they're on a voucher program. So that is true. That does open that up more.
Okay, so I would move that we oppose House Bill 25-1240. But I'll welcome to other considerations.
You make a good point, Councilor Crest. But it wouldn't be just ADUs that accept Section 8. It's just any regular sized apartment or any rental
As long
house.
as it meets the
Right.
requirements of
Yeah.
So to limit it to ADUs or making that basically the sword to deny this on.
I just want ADUs to go forward, and I think it's a prohibitive thing, but also for just an old apartment might not.
But if they don't meet the qualification for Section 8 renters, they wouldn't apply anyway. They wouldn't be,
Don't you have to go through the application process? Isn't that what this bill does? Is that you have to accept the application?
The landlord also has to go
So-
through the application process if they want.
Councilmember
if they wanna
Popkin has his
receive
mic light on.
voucher.
I'm gonna assert my
I was enjoying this conversation.
well,
But I have a suggestion here, which is I appreciate this flag that Councilmember Christ raised, and I think maybe I guess I wanted to ask staff: is there two clarifying questions? Do we know if Colorado Municipal League has taken a position on this?
I don't believe they have. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't believe 1240 has. I can
I
double
didn't
check that,
recall.
but
And do we know if there's a particularly urgent reason why we have to decide on this tonight?
no.
So my suggestion would be we hold on considering this and maybe table this for a future meeting, like our next meeting, just so we can get a little bit crisper on what's inbounds, what's out of bounds here. Because yes, that's my motion.
to table it.
To table this to our next meeting, so we can just get clearer on what is allowed or what's covered and included in this and what's not.
Okay.
So Crystal, I'll remove my motion and second.
So
Thank you.
Councilor Popkin moved to table this until we get more clarification, seconded by Councilor Crest. Let's vote.
And just to clarify, what I'll be bringing back is information on what properties this applies to.
Oh,
Gotcha.
That's, yeah, great.
Yeah, thank you.
And Councilor Crest, I appreciate you bringing up that point.
Meet the HUD standards anyway. So I'll bring it back. Yeah, you and I don't.
And that passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thank you. You're in the home stretch, Mayor. The next one is House Bill 25-1261. So there were several construction defect bills that came up, over the last period of time. Most of them have not been worth bringing to you because they either didn't do enough or weren't really going to be effective. Two of them, however, rose to the top. One that really would be harmful for tenants and really restricted a lot of what would. That really opened things up for developers, which is a good thing, but also really restricted the rights of tenants. This is House Bill 1261, and it was postponed indefinitely this week. So I'm not asking for a position on that one at this time. And the last one's House Bill 25-1272, which is construction defects for middle market housing. And this bill is also trying to kind of strike that balance between how do we remove some of the restrictions for developers so that they're incentivized to build condo and middle housing and middle market housing, but at the same time not harm the rights of the tenants. And so this bill, while it's not perfect, certainly has some really good qualities to it that really does strike that balance between the two. And so these elements I've listed out here, it's things like changing the statute of limitations, requiring different warranty periods to have a different number of people that are part of a lawsuit, for example. And so this is a bill that CML supported and asked for a call for testimony from cities. And so because we weren't going to be meeting and that timing didn't quite work out very well, I certainly talked to Councilmember Popkin, who is your Colorado Municipal League Policy Committee member. And plus the mayor was in Japan. Or was headed, like you were headed to Japan.
It's on the way.
That's right. And so Councilmember Popkin agreed to testify on his own behalf. And so I've attached his testimony here so that you can review it. But at this time, we're asking, the staff recommends that the city council support House Bill 25-1272.
Okay,
I'll move to support.
go ahead. No.
Well, I'll move, he had his light on, so he testified. So.
You can still move to support. I wanted to ask if Mayor Peck, you'd indulge. I was thinking, because this is not attached to our packet that's available publicly, if you'd mind if I just briefly read the testimony for the record? In our, not in the
No, it
actual
isn't.
online
It's-
packet.
It's not in our
Right.
online.
It's listed on the website, and I think it's attached afterwards, right?
Oh, is
You
it?
guys put it in afterwards.
Um,
Oh, if it's attached afterwards, I don't need to
Yeah.
indulge there.
And it's on
And-
the city's
Okay.
website currently.
Great. Then I won't do that. I would just note for the public, if you're interested in reading the testimony on this that I submitted for the committee hearing specifically last Tuesday, that is publicly available. If you can't find it, please just email me and I'll gladly send it to you. I think this bill does a couple things, and it comes particularly timely for this council because we, I think, all got a broad education about the construction defects law and the consequences of it when we were discussing the Quail Road annexation project just a month and a half ago, really, and why that particularly limits the for sale housing market. It doesn't mean that you have to build for sale housing. If this bill passes, it means that it makes it easier for developers to do that, so that there is more market flexibility and market choice, basically, in terms of both for rent and for sale properties that can be built. In particular, two things that really stood out here is that this House Bill 25-1272 reforms the current construction defects law, particularly, as Sandy was saying, by increasing the threshold of owners in an HOA that can challenge defects from a majority to 65%. And it encourages reasonable mitigation of alleged defects before initiating legal action. So again, decreasing that risk and liability for developers who do want to build legitimate for sale housing, and adds a few additional stipulations to try to balance this, all while not eliminating the ability for residents to hold developers accountable if construction is actually faulty or flawed. So that balance was really key there. So I was pleased to support CML's position on this and represent myself as a city council member here. I think it would be really prudent for us, given how prescient this issue has become in our community, for us to not only support this, but then kind of immediately act and kind of make our state delegation aware that we vehemently support this. The bill did pass committee last week, and so that's a good sign, but you never know what happens after that, after that exit ramp. So, or entrance ramp, should I say.
Are
So-
you running for Congress?
No, I am not. So that would be my hope, that we can not only just pass this, but also really act on this and send this to our state delegation here. So with that, I would move to support, that council supports House Bill 25-1272.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Popkin, seconded by Councilor McCoy to move House Bill, oops, it went away,
25-1272.
1272. And I want to say it's too bad Steve Altschuler left, because the 8 years that I've been on this council, we've been trying to get these construction defects revamped because they just weren't working, and that is why we don't have any condominiums built. So with this, Steve, you're going to get your condominiums. And mine's a yes. That passes 6-0 with Councilor Rodriguez absent.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just two quick things to note. If people are ever interested, these are always posted the Friday that I send them to you. You just need to search for Legislative Affairs on the website or look under the City Manager's office, and Councilmember Popkins' testimony is listed in full right now. If people want to go and read it, it is on the website. The other thing I would mention is that immediately after you oppose or support these bills, I certainly lobby our delegation to ensure that they understand your position immediately. So, thank you.
Great. And now we are at the city council. Oh, no, we are final call, public invited to be heard. Okay. Come on down, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's making me crazy.
Council members, Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. Just random hits on what I've heard tonight. I think we should strive for complete openness in what we do as a city. And I'm not saying we generally don't, but really radical transparency is what I think we should strive for. So how can the public make informed decisions at the ballot box if they're only presented partial information? And you heard some of that tonight in my housing critique. And I did want to clarify something. While I do think we really should let the public know what it means to market rate housing, I'm not suggesting that if we did that, everybody would be opposed to it. But at least everybody would know what it means to them, and maybe they would say, okay, it means my rent's going to go up 5%, but I think it's a good idea, or my house is going to cost $10,000 more, but I think it's a good idea. I just think if it's on the table and it's out there, it'll be better for everybody. On the tourism improvement district, that's a lodging tax, I gather. Opposed to that, when I travel and I see that on my hotel bill, it just leaves a really distaste in my mouth. On the bicycle stuff, I felt like with Phil, and I love Phil, I've known him a long time, but it just, sometimes I think we're in like a real life game of Sims, and not to really pick on the bike lanes. But I see, we neck down, we remove 4 lanes to 2 lanes, we put bike lanes up, and then I never see any bikes in the bike lanes. And do we ever have like a justification for the reduction of lanes and to go back to the way it was? Or is it just getting it is the goal? And that's what made me think of The Sims. And somewhere along the line, Councilman Popkin talked about success, and I don't remember what reference that was for, but what I see happen a lot is self-validation of numbers. We should define what success would be before we embark on things, so we know if we really had success. I just wanted to acknowledge you guys. I'm more informed than most, I think, and I just get hit with stuff all the time. The garbage enforcement or the plastic stuff, I don't know. But you guys have a lot referencing my plot from a few weeks ago. But I do think sometimes it's just virtue signaling by policy making, which I don't think is a good idea. Donations follow vision on nonprofits. A nonprofit is just a tax code rule, and I wonder sometimes why we seem to elevate nonprofits in stature. I don't think the government should necessarily be stepping in just because there's a decrease in funding. And as a taxpayer, I think a lot of these things should stand on their own. So thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Is there anyone else that would like to come on down?
Novalee, 2400 17th Avenue. I wanted to convey some feelings from our community to the council, as a lot of people in my age group and social communities don't really come to these kinds of events. It's actually my first time here, and I'm going to start being here pretty regularly because I realize how important it is, especially now. A lot of people in different minority communities are not feeling heard or seen by this group, or by anyone, actually. And I think that some of the things that we talked about today with nonprofits were very good, especially because some of them are doing some of those protective measures. But I think that visibility on the different kinds of problems that we're facing from the federal and state governments, and also just the political climate right now, is very important. I feel like people almost don't want to address the elephant in the room. And I think that's only harming people. I would like to see this council talk about these very real issues, because, whenever our most disadvantaged groups are being affected because of not being able to buy housing, not being able to afford schooling, not having accessibility to things because of, different kinds of disabilities or different demographics, and having protections removed constantly, which isn't your fault. Mostly these are federal movements. But whatever you all can do as our city government, seeing as you represent us, to protect these vulnerable groups would not only help those people, but would help the community, because everyone is part of some group. Everyone has something about them. A lot of people here are disabled. A lot of people here have different kinds of issues. They didn't come from money, whatever, but that doesn't mean they don't bring value to our community. And I think that whenever you throw the baby out with bathwater, you have one less baby. Thank you.
Thank you. Couldn't help yourself, huh,
Yeah,
Scott?
couldn't help myself. Scott Stewart, 229 Grand Street, Mayor Peck, members, council. Yeah, I won't be that long. Although we don't always agree on everything, I'd just like to say I really appreciate the effort that you guys put in. The package for the day was 311 pages. If nobody else paid attention, it's a real job you're doing up there. I appreciate your time, your effort, and the efforts that you're putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you,
Staff
Scott.
too.
It wasn't even that full. Like when it gets to 1,000 pages.
Yeah, I was going to say, huh. Seeing no one else, I'm going to close final call, public invited to be heard, and move on to mayor and council comments. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that today is Equal Pay Day for women, and that this is further exacerbated by the chaos of the Trump administration, and hopefully someday we'll have equal pay for equal work for women and men.
I like that comment. Councilor Christ.
Well, after my motion last week, I did contact Scott Cook, and we've been talking about ways to that the local businesses can get jump started, and for their benefit, and also to increase sales tax revenue and property tax revenue for the city, and so ways in which we can work together in order to do that. I have to say that we're in our 55 minutes of discussing the problem, and when we come to some solutions, we'll bring them to council.
Terrific. Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Today marks approximately my 60 days on council, and while we heard almost 2 months, and while we heard some different reports and progress reports and stuff today from staff, I wanted to provide a very brief update. I know you didn't formally ask for a progress report, but I felt like, given the unusual process, that it would be worth briefly noting. Over the last 2 months, I met with one HOA, met with 4 groups of residents, 20+ meetings with individual residents, Ward 2 businesses and organizations, 9+ meetings with city departments and functions, not including LHA, our Urban Renewal Authority, and council sessions. Attended 3 of the 4 committees live that I'm a liaison for. I have done 1 police ride-along, with another one scheduled tomorrow with our core team. I have gone door knocking just to introduce myself, not selling steak knives or anything else, in Creekside and Blue Vista so far, which is right across from the museum. I will continue to do that and let people know that I'm their representative. In one conversation, I even informed a resident of an open board position for the Sustainability Advisory Board, because that was very timely. Mayor and Council, when I said to you all and all of Ward 2 that I would hit the ground running, I meant it, and I thank you for your trust.
Thank you. Now I feel like I'm not doing anything.
I gotta pick up my game.
Once again, running for Congress, are you? Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't know if you were going to say anything about our trips. So did you want to go?
No, you go first.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take your thunder or lightning or rain.
Matthew already took it.
Oh. Love it. Okay. So the mayor and I went to our sister city, along with Longmont sister cities, to our sister city in Chino, Japan, for their 35th anniversary. along with the mayor and I and our sister cities, our international band students from Longmont High also went and performed with our sister cities students. So it was a sold out. Over 600 people attended the event. 160 students performed. It was amazing. The mayor did a really, really good job in representing Longmont. The students came up. I'm pretty sure some came up to the mayor too and said, "Thank you for being there." They really felt good that there was representation from their city there attending, watching them. So the kids saw that. And so at first I didn't think they would pay attention, but they did come up and say thank you. So I want to say thank you for allowing us to go and represent our city for our young people and also our sister cities. And I know Mayor is going to talk about meeting with the mayor and some of their city council. I just want to say their city council is made up of 20 city councilors, and basically their job is to tell the mayor what to do.
Yep. They don't represent anyone.
They do not talk to the community members. They do not, and also their school district is within the city. So the mayor does absolutely everything. So basically, like the city manager, he does absolutely everything. And the city council really just make sure he dot the I's and cross the T's. And that was eye-opening for us because they could not believe that we actually communicate with our community.
Yeah, public invited to be heard. They have nothing, and they were just shocked that you really have people come up during a meeting.
We told them to get on YouTube.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that they designed their manholes.
Oh, yes.
Pretty cool. You know, like we do our transformer boxes, they do the manholes. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And I'll let the mayor talk about our ride Longmont with their Navarra.
Yeah, they are very excited that they are also, through VIA, having their shared ride. What did they call it? Navarra? Navarra.
They had it since 2022.
But they're very anxious to talk to city manager about how we implemented that and our cost, because when we told them it was $2 and $1, he was amazed. How do you do that? I said, with a lot of help. There's a contingent coming in May, and City Manager Harold, I am asking if you would like to sit down with Mayor Imai and talk to him. He's very interested in how the city's run versus theirs. And then in July, I think this makes me happy on a global level, that the kids from the Northern Arapaho are coming, the kids from Chino are coming, and the kids from Mexico are coming, Ciudad Guzman. It's really important for me, where our country is, to show that all these different cultures, the way people talk, these kids get along. They like each other, and they learn from each other. And that's what makes a global world. And I'm really happy that Longmont is going to be supporting that. So, yeah, it was great fun. I really got tired of Japanese food, though.
Some variety.
Yeah, so I had to come home and have a hamburger. It was great. Thank you very much for the experience.
They do own their own hotels.
Oh.
They own it, yes.
So when someone leaves, they've purchased a house, but they leave it and they don't sell it, it reverts back to the city. So that's another thing that Mayor Imai wants to know, because now they're responsible for these houses. And they're having a difficult time getting people to move there. I did not get enough time to talk to him, because they have quite a bit of solar individually, and I wanted to know what their redundancy was. But they had us going nonstop, didn't have time to talk to them. So that's it. Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry.
So going back to our city exchanges, so while the mayor and Councilmember Yarborough were gone, we had the elder exchange with the Northern Arapaho. So I had the opportunity, Councilmember McCoy and I had the opportunity to attend the elder exchange dinner, and speaking with the Northern Arapaho elders, as well as our own elders in our community, and how rich our community is, but it's rich with people. It's the people, the experiences, the stories, and seeing these two different cultures merge together was amazing. So it was, I see what we're doing as a community with our youth and with our elders, and just bringing that sense home. Last week was my spring break. But I used that time to connect with constituents, so it was revolving door of meetings. So that was my spring break. But it helped me gain insight on what is needed, as well as looking, having a adult son with a disability, struggling with mental illness, and being able to reach out to other residents, and the number of times that people said, you know what, I'm going through that too. Or I have this child that I know that they're going to have to live with me for the rest of my life. And so as we move forward in our priorities and objectives, it does extend beyond core services. It creates, what are we doing to create a community of cohesive individuals that we build off of each other and we strengthen each other. And that's what's going to bring our community together. And what our resident constituent had said, that we're in a very trying time right now, and there are people that are worried. And what can we do as a body, as a community, to lift each other up? And so it goes beyond just policy and numbers, but there's also a human factor that we need to make sure we're not forgetting about as we move forward with these. I do not get very specific with the numbers. I have this idea, and I'm like, Harold, work your magic, and then come back to me. Yeah, so it was a really beautiful. It was that Friday, my last day of break. So it was a wonderful way to end the break with our Northern Arapaho folks and our own senior citizens. So.
Thank you, everyone. And now we're at city manager remarks.
Mayor, just let me know when they're going to be down, and be happy to spend time with them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely.
Do that work, and other than that, no comments.
Okay. City attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Oh.